All right, everybody, welcome back. We're going to get into the birth of the Roman Empire now. So we finished up the material before the midterm on the Roman Republic and kind of the events leading to the end of the Roman Republic. There's still one more story we need to talk about of how the Roman Republic ends and the empire begins, and that's what we're going to cover in this brief lecture. And then also just remember, for all of you in the History 110 class, this is the material where your quiz 2 is going to start from, and also the material where your final material is going to start from. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're taking notes, and always keep up on all the lectures and the videos. And let's begin talking about, because the birth of the Roman Empire is so important. We talk about the Republic a lot, and the Republic's interesting and fascinating and important, but the empire is also this time with these crazy emperors we'll be talking about. It's a lot of fun, and a period of time when Rome will eventually become a Christian civilization. That's going to be important. So there's a lot of really important topics we're going to be talking about. All right, so let's get going. So really you just have one major slide here, and the first thing you need to know, and just kind of as a brief reminder, before the earlier lecture, right before this, we had talked about the first triumvirate, if you remember, with Caesar and Pompey and Crassus, and how eventually that fell into this civil war, and eventually Caesar became Rex and then was assassinated in 44 BC in the Ides of March. And so now the question is, what happens after Caesar's assassination? And it's the events right after Caesar's assassination that are going to bring us to the birth of the Roman Empire. And so, we start with what we call the second triumvirate, right? So you see this term here again. The second triumvirate, don't mix this up with the first triumvirate. And the second triumvirate are three more military men loyal to Caesar for the most part, and they are individuals who saw this as an opportunity now to take control of this Roman world. And so you need to know them. They're, of course, Mark Antony, Octavian. Octavian was actually related to Caesar. He was the grandnephew of Caesar. And a man named Lepidus. He's not going to be as important in this story, but definitely as Mark Antony and Octavian, but you'll want to note him as well. And so, all three of these guys are pretty ambitious. That's natural. You can imagine that. And Mark Antony, wanted to be the ruler, but we also know that Caesar had named Octavian as his heir. And so this is going to obviously eventually create a bit of conflict between especially Mark Antony and Octavian. The other key point I want you to know about the creation of the second triumvirate is another marriage. In this case, there's this other name here, Octavia, another one of our key words. Octavia was the sister of Octavian, right? Clever. And she's going to marry Mark Antony. And you want to keep that in mind because that's going to be important in just a couple of minutes, this relationship they're going to have together. Now, they create this second triumvirate, and it doesn't take long for there to be conflict between them. One particular piece of real estate that created a bit of conflict was the island of Sicily, where Lepidus tried to kind of assert power over Sicily when it was really under more the domain of Octavian. Lepidus got in trouble for this. He was ousted out of the triumvirate. They didn't kill him. They just kind of put him in another position. But when Lepidus was kind of ousted out of this triumvirate as we move into the 30s BC, what that meant is kind of what we saw before. Now there are just two of them. There's Mark Antony and Octavian. Two very ambitious men, two men who both want to be the guy in the Roman world. And something's going to happen which is going to help trigger this conflict between them. And it's a crazy little story, and it's the story of what's going on in Egypt and Cleopatra. So now we're going to talk about the little quick story of Cleopatra here and how it relates to the eventual rise of the Roman Empire. And so Cleopatra, I mentioned her in the previous lecture, she was, of course, going to be the ruler of Egypt, the Pharaoh of Egypt. And Mark Antony goes to Egypt. So as all this is going on, Mark Antony takes a trip to Egypt. And when Mark Antony takes a trip to Egypt, he becomes infatuated with Cleopatra. So first she got Caesar, and now she's got Mark Antony. Now, you should be thinking, well, okay, this is going to be a little bit of an issue because Mark Antony's married. Who is he married to? Octavia, right? So this is already going to be a bit of a dynamic issue here because obviously this is going to alienate Mark Antony. It's going to, I'm sorry, alienate Octavian. He's not going to be happy about this. Octavia's not going to be happy about this. And eventually, Mark Antony will take Cleopatra as his wife. And when that happens, this really is going to be part of the conflict that's going to arise between the two men. Now, if there was never Cleopatra and all that, would there have been a conflict between Mark Antony and Octavian for power? Probably yes, right? But this is going to play a role in the war itself. So what's going to happen is we get to about 33 BC. There's a civil war now that develops between Mark Antony and Octavian. However, what is important to keep in mind is when this war begins, Mark Antony has his army loyal to him, has his Roman army loyal to him, but he's also got the loyal army of Cleopatra down here in Egypt, loyal to him as well. And so in the surface, you may think, well, okay, who has the advantage of this war, right? Because it's Octavian on one side with Roman legions loyal to him, and Mark Antony on the other side, but Mark Antony also has the forces of Cleopatra. And while on the surface, some students would say, well, that gives an advantage to Mark Antony because he's got more forces, in reality, this kind of backfires on Mark Antony because remember, at this point, Egypt is not part of Rome. And what Octavian was really good at doing is painting Mark Antony as a betrayer of Rome. Here he is sleeping with Cleopatra, this outsider, this foreigner. He was, I read once, I believe he was accusing Cleopatra of being a sorceress that was casting spells against Mark Antony, making him, betray Rome. And for any extra soldiers he gets from Egypt, Mark Antony is losing the loyalty of the Romans. And so without getting into the details of all the conflicts and battles, right, during this civil war, there is a battle called the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, in which Octavian is victorious. His forces are victorious. And there's a lot of places where you can find a lot of details on all these battles and stuff. But again, this just being a survey course, I just want to give you the big highlights. And so with that, what happens? Well, Octavian is going to be victorious. And then, of course, the story is what happens to Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Mark Antony and Cleopatra see they're going to be defeated, at which point they commit suicide. Mark Antony stabs himself. And what happens with Cleopatra? Well, if you watch all the movies, there's some snake that comes and bites her, and it's all very dramatic and everything. She probably just drank some poison. But at the end of the day, Cleopatra was dead as well, and so was Mark Antony, leaving this entire Roman, which is still technically a republic, in the hands of Octavian. And then Octavian spends a little bit of time, conquers Egypt. Of course, Egypt is now going to be part of the Roman world. And then Octavian, of course, is going to, as he's doing all this, return back to Rome. And when he returns back to Rome, this guy Octavian is going to go and change his name and get a couple new titles. And as he changes his name, the Roman Empire begins. And, it's kind of funny. A lot of people, I've never heard of Octavian. Who's this Octavian guy? And then I'm going to give you in the next lecture the guy's other name. And you go, oh, yeah, I've heard of him. And so who Octavian becomes, what's his new name, and the birth of the Roman Empire, the official start, that's going to pick up on our next lecture. All right, hope that's clear. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you, everyone.